Yeah, we'll just have a good conversation. Liz, it's
Okay.
wonderful to meet you. Thank
You
you so
too.
much for taking a minute out today.
Love it. Love it.
So let's begin our conversation before we get into your world of writing by asking you this. 5 years ago, this pandemic changed our lives, all of our lives in a lot of ways. How did you get through the pandemic, and how has it influenced the way either you wrote the memoir or the way that you live your life today?
Okay. So I kind of thought that question would be coming because I did listen to some previous episodes,
Yeah.
but I didn't think about how it impacted the memoir in terms of how I would answer it. From a family perspective, I had you know, middle grade to junior high kind of kids. And we're all relatively okay to be introverted. And so the time together was really amazing. I've heard other people respond that way, but it was like really we got into doing a lot more together creatively than we would have during that year or those years. Um, we were very, very careful. And because of people close to us with autoimmune issues. And so it was a bit scary. And I think I tried to keep that fear a little bit from them, but also maintaining our house rules on kind of what we're going to do. And so I often wonder like how much of that period, I'm more interested in how it affects that generation because some of their real formative years were spent in this weird isolation and state of fear. But overall, I know it impacted the world much more than it kind of did my life. I probably wrote a lot during that period. Oh, you know what I did? I started the very best online writing group ever, and they became my team. They took me to the end for this memoir, and we would meet once a week, submit our writing. We would give feedback and inspiration and support. And I was able to involve people who weren't all here in Minnesota. So, like, normally we would do these things in person, and we did them all online. And I know so much of that has changed. We aren't meeting in person as much for a lot of things, and that's good and bad. I
Yeah.
kind of miss the in-person stuff.
Yeah, me too. So let me ask you this. If I put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids at a career day, 12-year-olds, and they wanted to know exactly what you did on a daily basis for a profession, what would be your answer?
So this is funny. Okay, so I'm going to refer you back to several years ago when a lot of my writing comes from uh, somebody in my life, usually close to me, who says something, and I have too big of an emotional response for what they've actually said or asked,
Yeah.
and then I have to figure out why, because it always starts for me in my body. Like it's not always I have to write about it. So, my daughter I don't know what grade she was in, but she came up to me. Oh, she was a teenager for sure, and very independent, was making herself an iced coffee in the morning and getting ready for school. And she said, I'll just say Nina and I were talking at lunch yesterday, and she was like, what does your mom do all day? And I walked out of the room and I counted to 10. I like breathing. I'm like, should I write her a list of everything I do? Because I didn't have my consulting firm anymore. I didn't have my 9 to 5 job, but I was doing lots of things, particularly things for the family.
Yeah.
So I ended up writing this piece that was published on Motherwell magazine, and it was about what do I thought we were beyond asking stay-at-home moms what they do all day, or something like that. So it really hit me emotionally though, and so I explored that in the essay because it was a very layered reason. Obviously, I was doing a lot of writing. I had 3 kids, no drivers, that sort of thing. So I was doing a lot of driving, but uh, and I also really didn't give writing the credence that it deserved. Like you know, you're a writer, like, or is it just a hobby, So I had to explore all that in the essay. So that question kind of, I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but the
Oh,
the
that's
kids
good.
in the classroom, I would tell them that right now, after a full career in human resources and organization development, I've moved on to writing. I'm working as the uh, VP of the National Alliance for Mental Illness in Ramsey County here in Minnesota, to help change, make things better for people with mental illness and their families. And you're looking at legislation or stigma or education. Um, yeah, and I try to be here for my one son who's still in the house. The
Very
other two
cool.
are off in college. Yeah.
So what did you want to be when you were 12 years old? What was your dream job?
Oh my gosh, Joe, when I was 12, I was doing everything to escape it's my home.
Yeah.
So I was getting into a lot of naughty things already early. I didn't think past an hour away from my life.
Wow. So
Yeah.
in speaking of getting into the book, I want to know, was this a cathartic adventure for you, or was it painful, or when you even from the inception of you writing this, I'm sure going through all of that was painful. Ultimately, what brought you to that crossroads to write this memoir, and was it a cathartic journey for you?
Yes. So, what brought me to the crossroads, I'll start there. I hadn't been a creative writer. I'd written a lot in business. I'd written letters and gotten a lot of enjoyment out of that, but I hadn't done creative writing. But my father passed away, and because of our unique family, we were not going to be having service for him. I ultimately realized. And he passed away before I got the chance to really explore some things with him that I had wanted to. And I think that happens to a lot of us. We really don't think about what it is we want to learn from our parents until they're gone. Um, and we had a difficult relationship anyway. But he had a fascinating childhood, and I know it was the reason he was the father that he was. And so I started writing to dig into him and his life. He was born in Russia during when he was 5 years old, World War II broke out. And so he was a child of war. He was in Russia when the Germans invaded, and then their family were in Germany during the rest of the war and prison camps, and then he was in a refugee camp, and so ultimately it's just crazy that it's my father that was impacted by that war in Eastern Europe, and he immigrated to the United States sponsored by a church in Seattle. So I started to dig into like what was happening in history and then kind of lining that up with where my dad might have been based on the stories I did have from his mother, and a few from him. And next thing you know, I just started writing my memories
Yeah.
and realized that I was not the writer I wanted to be. And so started taking classes at the Loft. The writing was 100% cathartic at that time. It was all about writing. I think it's hard for a lot of people, and maybe memoirists, it's not as hard for them, even though I'm not going to say it wasn't painful, but the catharsis came from going to the painful places.
Yeah.
And I think that's what that develops interesting writing. I mean, that's where you become vulnerable and you have something to say to an audience that um, they don't normally hear, and that they can learn from. So I wanted to do that better than I was doing it in terms of reaching readers. And so I started taking classes at the Loft Literary Center here in Minnesota. And then it became like the first couple drafts, definitely all catharsis, all like pain and healing, and then it was more of an intellectual and taking what I've learned in the classes and the feedback from my writing groups and applying it to the writing and just crafting something that would be my goal was for it always to read more like a novel than a memoir. So I wanted there to be momentum. I wanted there to be a lot of scenes and a lot of sensory stuff. And so that took a lot of work for me. It took many, many years.
So let me ask you this. Who was that inspirational force or hero in your life that allowed you to get through those tough early years and to get to this point of where you're at today and writing the memoir?
I don't think I had one inspirational force. I think I
Mhm.
was the type of person that ended up um, looking lots of places for inspiration. Once I got myself out of the town I grew up in, I there were mothers of my friends or my boyfriends that had an impact on me just for how they cared for me, where I hadn't been used to that. And to give my parents credit, education was always very important to them. My dad was ended up being a professor at a small liberal arts college in Galesburg, Illinois, called Knox College. And my mother was educated. She was a high school teacher. She taught as long as she could before her illness kind of overtook her. And education was important. And that was just kind of in my blood. It was in my upbringing. And so going to graduate school, leaving town and going to graduate school was probably my biggest inspiration because then I was exposed to like leadership philosophies, a lot of kind of like self-help stuff of the 90s. Well, it wasn't really self-help stuff, but it was, like the Seven Habits of Highly Effective
Yeah.
People by Stephen Covey. Like that was huge for me. I mean, that felt like a self-help book. Like, okay, because it's really so much of it is like, what can you control? What are your inner values and how do you stay true to them while navigating what's happening on the outside? And so there was a lot of digging into what was important to me during my master's program. And so I don't have that one person. I've
Yeah.
never been asked that before. And now I'm
Okay.
going to go think about it because
Yeah.
maybe there's somebody there I haven't been giving enough credit to.
Yeah. So as a writer, what was your favorite book growing up or one of your favorite books of all time that really formed the way that you may approach your writing style?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say growing up. I loved Dostoevsky. I
Yeah.
loved Crime and Punishment. I read that in my early 20s. I like dark, like psychologically, the exploration of what's going on in people's heads and how that makes a character like, you know, in terms of Dostoevsky and Crime and Punishment, it was how it makes Raskolnikov so creepy. But um, just all the motivations of people, so the psychology of it, I guess. But when I started writing, I was hugely impacted by well, two books, I would say. One was Swallow the Ocean by Laura Flynn, and her book was a memoir, and it was about growing up with a mother with schizophrenia in the same time period. She was like a year older than me, and so many of her references, I could
Yeah.
relate to. But then also reading about her mother, I mean, I was just in tears because I had no idea that anyone else's mother at that time. Well, I figured there were other women and mothers with schizophrenia, but I hadn't connected with those daughters. And certainly when you write about your experience, it's just so much, it can be so much more um, impacting to the reader than just conversation sometimes. So that blew me away. And I realized that, I felt affirmed in many ways and like, I just recognized what memoir can do. It can change people, like not just the person writing it, like the catharsis that I went through, but like the readers and and then, you know, the broader world. Like there have been memoirs out there that have really changed the way culture deals with well, I mean, just like if you think maybe like sexual abuse or, transgender, like people who write their stories
Yeah.
and I feel like it does ultimately impact the culture. So I think memoirs are very important. And the next one I read was Lydia Yuknevich's Chronology of Water. And the reason that stayed with me is because she's such a genius with language and had come so far as a writer that she was able to break all the writing rules. So at that point, I was like, okay, this is how you form a sentence. This is how you make a paragraph. This is how you develop a character and a narrative, all of that. And then she just like blew it all up and wrote this memoir that like you feel it all the way inside and it's like I felt her book for weeks afterwards just because of how she wrote it, her language, and the fact that she didn't really follow any rules. And so that got me excited about the potential. Like I didn't have to write something traditional. And so I'd say those two were my biggest influences in writing. I'm not the writer they are. I'm the writer I am. So there was no way that I was trying to attempt to copy their styles, but they were the inspirations. Yeah.
So the book is very well reviewed. It's on Goodreads, and you got a lot of 5 stars on Amazon. So you've got a lot of really good feedback. But what's been one of the most memorable letters or emails that you've gotten that you've like you've talked about being touched by feeling and living the same reality? Have you had that experience from somebody that's read your book?
I think it's been an interesting road since publication because I didn't really know how it would land with people. I don't think any writer does. You have hopes, and my hopes were that I would reach people the way, Swallow the Ocean reached me. But I think because I cover so many aspects of being human, like being a daughter, um, being a friend, being a sister. So it's a lot about relationships and forgiveness and, making your way towards a place of being able to understand and forgive. That it has resonated with a lot more people, like many more people than. So my father was an alcoholic, and many of us grew up with a parent or parents who had addictions, and so there's that group of people as well.
Mhm.
But I think the one of the there's so many. One of the best um, messages I got was that a person who had grown up with a father who was an alcoholic, and he had read a book for adult children of alcoholics, and it when he was in his 20s, and it really helped him kind of understand why he had certain idiosyncrasies, certain ways of moving through the world, were really a result of having an alcoholic in the household. And he said, and it was really healing for him. And he said there's a lot of people in his life now who he thinks could benefit from a book like that, but he doesn't feel like that would be appropriate for him to say, here, read this self-help book because you're an adult child of an alcoholic. But he said, I could give them your book and it would do the same thing. And so it allowed him to reprocess parts of his childhood in a very healthy way, is what he said. So I think that's awesome. Like I
Yeah,
didn't write a self-help book. I wrote a story that I wanted to read like a novel.
yeah.
And so yeah.
That's perfect. So let me ask you this. Of everything that you've done and accomplished and evolved to at this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Becoming a mother, I
Yeah,
have to say that first, because I wasn't, part of the book was I was not going to have kids.
yeah.
And I wasn't going to have kids because I did not want to become like my mother, who was suffering with schizophrenia and trying to move through the world with anosognosia. So with anosognosia, she did not, which is means you're not aware of your illness, or you don't have insight into it. So she never got treatment for it. So I was not going to become a mother. I didn't have, she was not a great role model for that. And I, didn't know if I'd be able to find my way with having that experience. And so very intentionally, my husband and I decided to have children kind of late. Like my first one was born when I was 35, and the third was born when I was 39. Not too late these days, but later than normal. And and I am proud of my parenting.
Yeah,
It's been, you don't do everything right.
sure.
And I'm sure I've given them something to write their own memoirs about. But Yeah, and they're fantastic kids, and I just get so much I get so much fulfillment out of my interactions with them and watching them grow and learn and become who they are. And so, yeah, this second to that would be the book.
So let me ask you this. Let me dig a little further behind that. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, all of your
Yeah.
readers, everyone that you work with, that you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Who do I think I am?
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to springboard off that question and maybe
Yeah.
I'll get to your answer.
Sure.
I think I've found myself, more of myself through the writing process, through the memoir writing process. I think that what memoir allows the writer to do is reclaim their story. Who are they and what happened to them and how did they deal with that? Because like you said, other people have their versions of what they think my story is, um, or what have you. And I feel like, and there's a quote at the beginning of my book by Lydia Yuktovich. Um, it's memory for me poses a kind of crisis in representation, where the desire to capture what really happened meets the desire to build a story that will help us get on with our lives. So, do you get what she's saying
Yeah.
there?
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I so much you can write about anything and you can frame it any way you want and it's still going to be your truth. And so, how do you write it in a way that's going to really help tell your story or reclaim your story? And so, um, I don't know. It's hard for me to answer your
You
question.
just did. It's a
Okay.
very daunting question. It's big, but you just absolutely did it well, very, very well. So, with that, if if anybody wants to pick up a copy of You're Too Young to Understand, they want to reach out to you, any of the other good business in your world, where's the best place for them to go?
Probably to the website. It's www.liz, and then the last name is Sjaastad.com.
Okay.
And there's everything on there from the book to media to signing up for my monthly newsletter.
Okay. I will put that link in the show notes. Liz, this has been absolutely wonderful. I love these stories of overcoming and evolution and just getting to the other side and feeling that cathartic, breakthrough. So thank you so much for your story. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thank you.